Where's the special sauce?
Yeah. Where's the special sauce? And just don't spill hot coffee in my lap.
I need some of the Jack Daniels.
Yeah, he's a popular man up here in Memphis and
Is
at the
he?
Cherry Farm. Oh yeah, he's a saint. In fact, got a big show today. Jake Wimberly, ESPN 105.9, the afternoon drive, Jackson, Mississippi, is going to come on talking all things Mississippi, SEC, strength of schedule, college football. He does the numbers. He crunches the numbers, the matrix and all. You're going to love hearing this, how college football, we're going to talk about SEC teams and how they stack up nationally. All right, Dudley Dawson, Hogville.net checks in, and Vince Ferrara from the Sports Animal in Knoxville. All over the SEC, from Key West to the tip of northern Kentucky and everything west and east and in between, the Southeastern Conference. We are here to serve. Smash the subscribe button, bottom right-hand corner. Allow notifications on your Android or iPhone. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors. Watch us live. Sync us on your truck, your boat, at the beach, wherever you are. Tell friends, family, and neighbors. Listen live or at your leisure. We're coming right back, so get ready to take some notes.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Jake Wimberly joining us here in just a moment, and there he is. I got to love a man who has an awesome afternoon sports show in Jackson, Mississippi, ESPN 105.9, The Afternoon Drive. Also a degree in civil engineering. He's the son of an architect. I can tell you one thing. It takes tremendous mental strength to be an engineer or an architect because they design and make the world move. You take all that smart stuff, Jake, put it into the football schedules, the teams, their strengths, their weaknesses. You have content found nowhere else in the civilized world, and I assume the uncivilized world as well. But how you doing?
Hey, Rob, we're doing good. Good to be with you and Brenden today. And look, hey, yeah, a lot of content, right now, churning through a lot of that content. A lot of high school football in the state of Mississippi. Called a jamboree last night. Really fun, to get out and watch a little spring football. And then we got high school baseball championships that we're getting ready to roll through next week. So it's a busy time of year. Plus, don't forget, there's college baseball.
Yeah, and Mississippi, the state, is the king of college baseball in America. And as of the last few years, it's been an unbelievable run. You talked about the jamboree, the high school jamboree. That's something that I loved, growing up and watching. And then you got the 7-on-7 camps we hear so much about. What do you see in the state of Mississippi per capita, again, puts out more players to the NFL than any other state in America?
Well, I tell you, there's a lot of talent that's coming through the state. As always, through the state of Mississippi, some really good, a couple good quarterbacks in the senior class, some really good skill set players. There's a really good running back out of Quitman, Mississippi. I know you know where Quitman is.
Yeah.
Down there around Wayne County, just south of Meridian. And I've told you this, I do the play-by-play and all the media for Branden High School, where Gardner Minshew and Will Rogers played. Yeah. And boy, they've got some studs coming through. I mean, they've got probably 4 or 5 SEC guys on that roster right now, from a defensive back to a running back who's a sophomore, quarterback who's going to be a sophomore. They got a lot of good talent, but there's a lot of good talent in this state again this year.
Well, you talk about Will Rogers real quick. You've known him since middle school. He's at Washington now. He is one of the top 2 or 3 returning quarterbacks in all of college football in terms of total yardage. What do you expect him to do out there at Washington that maybe last year was rough for him, but he's someone that I'm just a huge fan of, and you know him.
Yeah, I spoke with his dad last night. His dad is still the offensive coordinator and associate head coach at Branden High School, and he said Will is loving the Seattle area, loves it up there. Has really kind of embraced the whole area. Embrace the campus and ready for his last year in college. And I think it comes down to that offensive front. They lost 5 guys off of offensive line that went to the national championship. 2 of them are sitting at Ole Miss this year. Yeah. So, the offensive front can gel. Per his father, I mean, him and Fish have really kind of bonded and created this, chemistry pretty quickly, seemed to really get along. So, I think Washington this year with Will, I mean, I've got them with 8 wins via my metrics, the college football hourglass. And I think Will could, you look at that schedule, he could put up, it's numbers 3,200 yards, 3,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, something of that nature, and get him kind of back in that at least that name recognition for the National Football League for the next year. Not saying he's going to get drafted, but in a year where the class of quarterbacks does not look nearly as deep as it was this past year, I think he can really make some moves, and I would expect him to do that at Washington.
Well, when you look at Dylan Gabriel's the returning leader with 14,875. He's at Oregon. And then Will Rogers is second, 12,245. Take into account last year, he really didn't do much at all in that offense that Zach Arnett tried to run. And I'm not trying to be, Pollyanna and silly and question you because you know him better than me. But why wouldn't a guy like that be drafted?
Well, again, you look at it a lot of times quarterbacks. Well, first let's look at what we do know about Will. I mean, he's got a really good release. He's gotten a knock for some of his arm strength, and he may not have as strong of an arm as some of the other guys that you've seen come through. Yeah. Maybe not an arm like Jaden Daniels or an arm like Caleb Williams or even Drake May, who just got drafted. But he knows how to play football. He's very savvy. He can make all the throws. We've seen him do it time and again at Mississippi State. And I think a lot of times these air raid quarterbacks that played under Mike Leach, they get a little bit of a stigma, right? So you got to go show that you can do something different. I mean, just take Gardner Minshew, for instance. I mean, Gardner, when he came out of Washington State, obviously 4th, 5th round, Jacksonville, but then you're playing behind these number ones. One of the things you know about the NFL is even if you're a 4th or 5th round pick, unless you're just Brock Purdy, who, if it wasn't for injuries, we don't know that we would have ever seen Brock Purdy. Remember Dak Prescott? Dak Prescott, there was injuries in front of him. He got the opportunity. Gardner has bought his time, played well when he had opportunity at Jacksonville, Philadelphia, now Indianapolis. And it's taken him now his 4th team to get a shot with, to take on Aiden O'Connell this year. And I say all that to say is just air raid quarterbacks. I think there is a stigma around them because, a lot of them have failed in the National Football League, but then you've got a lot of them that have made it. So I think that's part of the deal with Will is that air raid stigma.
Yeah, and I agree with that, but it just football mind. He'll certainly get into coaching if he eventually. I see that as his future. But now I want to ask you about some teams in the SEC. I want to ask you first. We had at the Touchdown Club Monday night. Greg McElroy talked about Mississippi State, and he said, as a player in Alabama, you hated playing them. It doesn't matter who the coach is. And I agree with him. There's a mentality. It's a blue-collar mentality. We're going to play a full 60, and you're going to remember us no matter what happens. And he talked about Jeff Lebby. We know what he is. He's a straight shooter. If he's got a quarterback, he's going to say he's good. If the guy struggles, he'll say something like, he's a good teammate. I mean, so let's talk about him.
Oh, look, I tell you what, I think what you're going to see with Mississippi State this year now, that you're not going to confuse them with Texas or Georgia or maybe even Ole Miss this year. But I think you're going to see a much better product. And I don't know how you could not see a better product. Like you mentioned, last year's product on the field was less than desirable. So, they've got a lot of young talent that they're going to be rolling out. Mississippi State is the youngest team, arguably in the SEC, only returns 4 starters. So, I mean, literally it is in this transfer portal crazy world that we live in, it is a brand new football team, new coaches, new players, new quarterback, new everything. And I think Jeff Lebby likes his quarterback, Blake Shapen, that he has this year. And I would say this team, for no other reason, they're going to be fun to watch. They're going to put some points on the board. They're going to probably get hit in the teeth a couple times, that middle part of their schedule where they have to go to, sandwiched into a bye week, go to Texas, to Georgia. Yeah. That's just playing in the SEC. But, if Jeff Lebby can somehow get this team bowl eligible and have them, an opportunity to get to 6 wins. And I know we don't put a lot of stock into bowl games anymore, but I think that does say something for the program and kind of gives you a benchmark of where they could be.
Well, it gets you that extra 20 days of practice. I mean, people underestimate how big a deal that is. All right, I want to ask you about a couple of more teams. Looking at Florida, you've got everybody's talking. Graham Mertz, 26 starts at Wisconsin, comes in last year. Florida lost some close games. You make some adjustments in a few places. Could have been a different schedule, but your record's what it is. DJ Lagway is the X factor. I don't remember. My dad does. 1953-54, the X and Y quarterbacks, Vince Dooley and Jim Pyburn at Auburn, lost to Vanderbilt 25-13 in the Gator Bowl in 55, but used two different quarterbacks, Wally Woodham, Jimmy Jordan, Florida State, 1979. You don't see it very often. Chris Leak, Tim Tebow. What about the possibility you think, and I want to get your thoughts on Billy Napier, because you really dig deep into him. That guy didn't get a lobotomy on the way to Gainesville. And I'm not saying this because Brenden is a Gator and whatever, but I think you're a fool to pull the plug on a coach, except in the case of someone like Brian Harsin, when you know it's obvious. Billy Napier can coach, but I want you to get your thoughts on what he's got with those quarterbacks and then the rest of the team.
Yeah, look, Napier, when he was at Lafayette, I mean, he did some big things down there. And, there were several years, I know you guys remember, his name was in the hat, for different jobs. You heard rumors of Mississippi State at one year, rumors of Auburn, rumors of South Carolina. And those never, manifested into reality. And now, of course, at Florida. And, I think Billy Napier is a really good coach. I think, obviously, he knows how to recruit. It's just, excuse me, it seems like a revolving door there. But a lot of schools seem that way. Some attrition in the transfer portal. Graham Mertz, could be one of the better ones in the Southeastern Conference. I've got him, and let me just look real quickly on my SEC sheet, and I'm going to stare away from you guys real quick. I've got him right now as the sixth best quarterback in the league going into the year, and that's behind, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, Brady Cook at Missouri, and then Graham Mertz. So he's right there. So he's at the top of, middle to the top of the pack as far as quarterbacks, and then you add in Lagway. I mean, I think you could see, a situation where, and I don't like the term packages, but that they use some packages for him to get him on the field. The problem with Florida, and everybody knows this, is that schedule. We did this exercise. Everybody's on Missouri, and rightfully so. If you took Florida, and based on the analytics that I have for Florida, and you gave them Missouri's schedule, they're probably an 8-win football team.
Oh, yeah.
If you took Missouri and gave them Florida schedule, I don't know that Missouri gets bowl eligible. I mean, opening with Miami, and then, of course, having Texas A&M 2 weeks later, play in Central Florida, play in Florida State on the back end. I mean, it is awful, this schedule. So, I'm with you. I don't think you get rid of Billy Napier this year. I know the win total set somewhere around 5.5. I have them actually under that. And it has nothing to do with Florida and Billy Napier in this team. It has everything to do with the schedule. But if they can somehow get a win against Miami week 1, maybe a win against Texas A&M in week 3, then this whole thing may change, and this narrative may change on Billy Napier in Florida.
And what I think, and we talk about this every day, here it is, May 15th, and you're looking at the schedule of 2024. That's assuming that everybody that you're playing is not going to have any problems, any issues off the field. And that's why there's such this defeatist, woe is me attitude among a lot of fans going into the season. But again, it's a 12-chapter book. And you being an engineer, you know damn well, and I was guilty of this a lot, I would read the first 2 or 3 words of a sentence, go to the end, and skip the middle. And then I started tape recording my classes, and I started making really good grades. But that's the way my brain works. So I look at that schedule, and I look at the talent that Billy Napier's bringing in. I look at Jeff Levy, what he did at Ole Miss. He goes to Oklahoma. He's back at Mississippi State. I think coaching's at a premium like we haven't seen in decades, Jake Wimberly. That's why it's so – people kind of tell people real quick about Levy, because I know when he was at Ole Miss, I know what the Ole Miss people said about him. They're going, they thought he was the brains of the whole thing. That's what praise they had for him. And they told me that straight up.
Well, there was a lot of times where, when Kiffin, if he was or wasn't flirting with other jobs, a lot of Ole Miss fans would say, I'm paraphrasing, hey, well, we'll just hire Jeff Levy. So that tells you where Ole Miss was with Jeff Levy. Now, that is not taken away from the mental fortitude of Lane Kiffin. We've seen Lane is an unbelievable football coach. Very witty, very savvy. I mean, the guy knows what he's doing. So, but I think Jeff Lebby, and a lot of times, and state fans don't necessarily want to hear this. They don't like this comparison, but so you want to see what Jeff Lebby's going to do? Look in Oxford. Like literally look in Oxford. That's cut from the same cloth. They're the same kind of coach. They have the same kind of, principles of football. That's where, Jeff Lebby wants to make this team. And, you see Lane Kiffin clowning Jeff Lebby a lot. And, I think it's because, now some of that probably gets old at Lebby. And we don't necessarily know the full relationship between two people ever. Yeah. But it seems like it's cordial. It seems like it's good. They left on good terms. But again, I say, if you want to see what Mississippi State could look like, just look in Oxford.
I agree with that. That was my point. But you said it unsolicited. And I think Lebby is an elite level offensive mind. And so it'll be fun to watch that thing. And now there's another team. You talk about a team that's struggling. It's a mess. South Carolina with Shane Beamer. You've got, Spencer Rattler. I don't know. I can't remember. Was he drafted in the 5th round?
I believe that's right. Yes. Went to New Orleans.
Okay. So what is happening at South Carolina? Are they just spinning their wheels? I don't see a way out.
Well, let me just kind of throw some numbers on you here. I've got South Carolina power ratings wise at 14th, right there, actually, believe it or not, right behind, right in front of Mississippi State, right in front of Florida, power ratings wise, they're right there. But when you look at recruiting, I mean, they're, going to be down the list, obviously, with the Kentucky's, Mississippi State's, Vanderbilt's, and Arkansas's. Quarterback wise, we don't know what they have. We know Shane Beamer named, a quarterback, but then you go and you look at South Carolina this past year, 48th in the country in offensive scoring efficiency and 55th in defensive scoring efficiency. Very, very marginal. So, I mean, this is a team that, for whatever reason, they just can't seem to get over that, 5-7, 7-5 type of hump. And I don't know what you do about it. I mean, Steve Spurrier was able to do it a couple of years. We've seen some teams there that were, they were able to do it. But for me this year, I think it's going to be, a tough year for South Carolina. I have them looking real quickly. South Carolina, I've got going 4-8, and now they play Kentucky in week 2. That should be, what I consider a one possession ball game. LSU in week 3 is probably a loss, but then they go Ole Miss, Bama. On the road at Bama, on the road at Oklahoma, another bye week, Texas A&M. There's just not a lot of wins on this schedule. As you see it as of today, like you said, as of today, they'll have a shot against, probably, and who knows? Look, they host Ole Miss, they host LSU. Maybe they can grab one of those ball games, but I just don't see, and I think Vegas has them somewhere around 4.5 to 5 wins as well. So I just don't see a lot of success this year up there.
All right. And again, you can catch him, ESPN 105.9, The Afternoon Drive, Jake Wimberly. All this football information. I don't know anybody else that does this kind of data. And I wish we had the graphics up here, 1 through 16, to see who you've got picked. But give me your top 4 in the SEC as of May 15th, 8:19 a.m. Central Greenwich Mean Time.
Top 4 in the SEC, and I'll send you some of this stuff so we'll have it for the next time.
Sure.
This is prior to the Southeastern Conference Championship game. I have Texas at 1. I have them winning the head-to-head against Georgia and Austin. I have Georgia 2, Ole Miss 3, and then I got Tennessee at number 4. I love this Tennessee team. And look, you look at their schedule. I like the schedule that they have. LSU comes in at 5, Oklahoma 6, Auburn 7, and Texas A&M at 8. But a lot of people are all over Missouri. I tend to be the same way with Tennessee, just because of their schedule, because of the quarterback. We'll see what Nico can really do this year. And you look at some of the skill position talent that they have. If they can pull this thing together defensively, Tennessee is going to be a handful.
Yeah, Nico Iamaleava. I've been working on that.
I can never get it right.
and DJ Uiagalelei. That's the one that I
ukulele.
Ukulele. There we go. Yeah. Okay, so Tennessee. I think about that. You say schedule. You got Ole Miss. Ole Miss. You know what it's like. Don Kitchens, one of the owners of Landers Ford, was there. They're big sponsors of the Touchdown Club Monday night. He played at Ole Miss, and they were talking about 100,000 people in Oxford the last weekend in April for Double Decker Festival. And someone said, I believe there was some drinking involved. I'm sure it's a lot of it's big. He said, everybody there, it's playoff or bust. How's Ole Miss going to handle, in your opinion, being the hunted versus the hunter? They won more games last year than ever before in school history.
I think that they're going to be fine with it. And the reason being is because, this is a team that won 11 ball games last year. So this is a team that, you go back and you look at the schedule. And yes, if Kiff, and that's going to be the biggest job is, one, can you stay healthy if you're Ole Miss? And then two, if you're the coaching staff, how do you keep this team focused on what's going on the field and not start to believe all the hype off the fild? So, you open up with Furman, Middle Tennessee, and then a road game at Wake Forest. You should be 3-0. Georgia Southern you come back Georgia Southern at home, and then Kentucky. That'll be the first big test. But that game against South Carolina on the road, that could get dangerous before you play LSU. Then a bye week, then Oklahoma, Arkansas on the road, and Georgia. That's really your schedule. You do host Florida and Mississippi State to end the back end of this thing. So I think this team, again, coming off 11 wins last year, they were kind of a hunted team last year. So they've been in the limelight. They'll have every opportunity to meet all of their goals, which for them, I know it's college football playoff or bust.
Yeah, and with the 12 team, and Brenden and I talked about this yesterday, Greg McElroy was saying the way he broke it down, he thought the SEC not going to get 4 teams. He goes, they're going to try to give 2 to the ACC. They'll give, the SEC likely 2, the Big Ten 2. I don't know who the Big Ten 2 would be, but I think when it gets to, the actual season, the SEC is that strong. How are you going to stop the momentum?
I have wondered what Greg McElroy has said. I have thought the same thing and said it on my show is, if we're really talking about the best 12 teams, obviously you got to take the conference champions out. So the Big 12 champion is likely not going to be one of the top 12 teams in college football, but they will get a seat at the table. What does the committee do? So meaning, are they going to try to, because it's a 12-team playoff, are they going to try to have this parity, triangulation to where, just what you just said, we got to have 2 here, we got to have 2 there. How will the rankings show that? Will they move? It's going to be very interesting to see how they compare, say, for instance, a 10-2 Ole Miss team with a 10-2 Kansas State team that doesn't win the Big 12. Yeah. Do they try to go with 2 group of 5 teams? We know we get 1. Let's just say, for instance, Liberty runs the table. But what if you have a 1-loss South Florida team out of the AAC? So I will be interested to see what the committee does with this. Notre Dame, if they win 10, they are in. There's no doubt, and they should. So I agree with him. Not to the point where I'm adamant that, hey, it's going to be 2 here, 2 there. I've got 4 SEC teams in it, and that's going to be the 4 that I mentioned: Tennessee, Ole Miss, Georgia, and Texas. And then I have 3 Big Ten teams in it. That would be Oregon, Ohio State, and then Penn State. And then, of course, it chalks down from there. But it's going to be fascinating to see how the committee handles this.
Yeah. And again, Greg McElroy was just saying he thought they would try to avoid, I guess, being seen as SEC heavy, but he had a great conversation. Real quick, I saw that from Steve Johnson, Oklahoma fan watching the show. And I'm working on trying to get really good coverage for Oklahoma. There's Sooners Illustrated. We've had Tyler McComas on. He's just difficult to bring on. I heard him on the Chuck Oliver show hosting one time. Really good. But I tried, and I'm digging into Oklahoma. Real quick, Dudley Dawson's going to be on here with us for a few minutes before you go, and I want you to talk about Arkansas with him. Give us a Cliff Note version of Oklahoma football as you see it today.
Hey, we talked a lot about Oklahoma last week on my program, and I tell you what, I like this team. I've got Oklahoma right now as let's see, let me go over here and look. The Oklahoma Sooners, I've got winning 9 football games. I like their schedule. I like their quarterback. I like their skill talent. That's what's funny. The kind of the narrative in the SEC is, at least from people down here, is they talk about Oklahoma like, it's Texas Tech or somebody out of the Big 12 that's never won anything. This is one of the more decorated programs coming into the Southeastern Conference. And, I think Oklahoma is going to be a handful for a lot of people. I think I don't know that it's a great year, but I have them at 9. I could see them at 8. I think they're going to be a handful for a lot of people.
Well, that's one of those programs that all of us on this panel here grew up watching 52 conference championships, 7 Heisman Trophy winners, 7 national championships, and a tradition that is just boomer sooner. I mean, Dudley Dawson, this is Jake Wimberly, ESPN 105.9, The Afternoon Drive in Jackson, Mississippi. Puts the matrix in of all the teams. And give Dudley your thoughts on Arkansas real quick. I know you've got a few minutes, but I want to get kind of a little back and forth between y'all before you have to go.
Well, for Arkansas, I mean, I think Vegas, the win total, depending on the book you have, is somewhere around 4.5. I've got Arkansas around 4 or 5 wins, depending on, there's several swing games in there. The question is, and Dudley can answer this much better than I can, is Bobby Petrino, can he make them a touchdown or 10 points better like he did Texas A&M last year? What does he get out of the quarterback? And as I've said before, can he save Sam Pittman's job? And I hate to put it that way. It'll be fascinating. And what is the benchmark? Where does Sam Pittman need to be? Dudley can probably answer that a lot better than me. Dudley, where do they need to be?
Well, first of all, it's accurate that I think Coach Pittman's job's on the line here, and that's one of the reasons that Bobby Petrino's back here, because the availability to find open people in the offense is much better when he's around.
Yeah.
Lots of things go on off the field, or did back in the day, but on the field, he's always been a great coach, and has gotten quarterbacks to play to their level. He feels really good about Taylor Green, who's the young man that transferred from Boise State. But, if I was sitting here and had to bet the house, I think 5 would be about right until I see what they can do, not in the first week against UAPB, but in the second week when they have to go to Oklahoma State. That'll tell me kind of where they're at. In these days and day and age where you have the transfer portal, they have gotten some really good kids out of the transfer portal, especially on the offensive line, which was a weakness last year. So there's the potential to make a run here and outdo the Las Vegas odds makers. But right now, I'm very hesitant because of the way last year went.
Yeah. Once the season starts, everything changes. And Dudley's right. Week 2 at Oklahoma State, we talk in the SEC very myopically. But when you play these teams during the regular season, Jake, it's always a lot different. And I know you've got a heart out at get Gabe Eichert on. Hey, give me the contact information. I'll bring him on, because I don't have a lot of relationships out in Oklahoma. I've done some dog trials in Shawnee and places like that, but I would love to have on a strong boomer sooner, because I know, I follow that program. You can't help it. But Jake, you've got a great show in the afternoon. What are y'all talking about today? And let's do this again next week. And next week, well, I sent you a link with Brenden on there. So send him whatever graphics and whatever you need to get, and we'll put that up next week. And really, really appreciate your hard work. Your show is absolutely fantastic, and I'll come on anytime.
Thank you so much.
Or Dudley, if you ever need him too.
Oh, we've had Dudley, I think, on before. We need to get him back on too.
Yeah.
I need to circle back and talk some Arkansas football. We'll do that. So today, obviously, we'll peek into SEC baseball as we head towards the final weekend. Excuse me, starts tomorrow, and then of course, some NFL stuff, a lot of college stuff. We'll just continue to churn down the road we go. And of course, this time of year, we're doing a kind of around the state 30-minute segment each day, previewing high school football, kind of getting a post-spring football analysis for high school football in the state.
See, that's what I love about this show, man. We get boots on the ground, and I'll be looking forward to hearing what you got to say next week. Thanks for coming on here with us, and have a great week. All right,
appreciate it.
You bet. Dudley, again, you agree with me? May 15th, it's easy, or you're at the beach drinking a road soda. Oh, that schedule's easy, or that schedule's hard. It's so different, isn't it? The week of the game. And you know this, when you're down at field level before the game and you're looking going, those guys are all Division I players too on the other side of the field. It's so easy to boast, but I like what Jake does, and you do. You dig deep into there. Now,
I think most of the Arkansas fans would tell you every year the schedule's hard, and that's been a combination of two things. It has been hard, plus their team hadn't been what they wanted it to be at times.
Yeah. Well, Houston Nutt was on the show with us last Friday, and Friday we call it Savant Friday with the guys. They said we got to make him a regular. He's really cool. Meeting him last week and talking to him, he finally went to his first tailgate in his life last year. I don't think people put that in perspective, Dudley. how much of these guys' lives are devoted to football. And he's, got 4 kids. I mean, it's golly. And you can tell, man, he is so enthusiastic about what he does. And just some great insight. But the thing I drew away from it was Texas and OU. He said, I live out in Texas. So you got 30 days to get ready for somebody. That's one thing. But doing it week in and week out. You know what I'd compare it to? Going down a 20-mile canoe trip or kayaking. About every 500 yards, you got a class 4 or class 5 rapids you got to deal with. That's the grind of the SEC. Elaborate on that. And I know we got Oklahoma people. We got people all over watching. But, Arkansas and Oklahoma, they only played 16 times in their history. But my God, that is a rivalry waiting to happen. It's like it was scripted in Hollywood, I think.
Yeah, right. It's right next door here. I could drive 30 minutes and be there in Oklahoma. And certainly, as you said, they only played 16 times. Some memorable ones, especially in the Orange Bowl for Arkansas, which is kind of the one they played. But I'm looking forward to having both those schools in here. It's in every sport. And we're getting ready to host an NCAA regional up here in Fayetteville, and Oklahoma's number 1 in softball. Texas is number 1 in softball. Oklahoma's number 2, and Oklahoma's been dominant. And all 13 SEC softball teams were already in the NCAA tournament. So I guess it would be 15, if it was this year. So I'm looking forward to that in just about every sport. I'm not necessarily for expansion willy-nilly all over the place, like the Big Ten has done. But I do think there are some elements and some narratives that, have me excited as we go down here in the 60s of my life to, have some new narratives to write about. Well,
what you talk about the SEC footprint, who will number 17 be? I say contiguous footprint, from Key West to Lake Michigan, Notre Dame. That was going to be 17. But the one thing the SEC's got over everybody else is that contiguous footprint. All the states are connected, and the fans know one another. You go to a touchdown club in Memphis meeting, it's tough because you've got all these different fan bases. There's not the natural anchor like in Little Rock, touchdown club. Arkansas State and Arkansas are going to play in 2025, first time ever. How big a deal will that be? I'm sure it'll be much bigger for the folks in Jonesboro.
Well, having grown up closer to Jonesboro than Fayetteville, I've got an affinity for, I went to a lot of games growing up there, a lot of football. So I'm all for it. It's gotten, me some heat over the years when I've written that they should play. And I understand why they didn't over the course of time, but it's a different landscape now. And so what if you lose to them? Baseball's lost, to very few of them. Baseball's lost a couple of in-state ones, and they've still been able to go to the College World Series. I mean, the earth didn't end and all that. So I'm looking forward to it. It should be fun. That'll be a hot ticket, I'm sure.
Yeah, and you think about, I know Auburn lost to Alabama State a few weeks ago. Look at the roster of Alabama State, Dominicans, Puerto Rico. These kids, they're recruiting. Trust me. There's really good baseball all over the country. Hogs, SEC, man. 4 of the top 5 teams are SEC schools. What's different about Arkansas as they head into the stretch of the last weekend and then Hoover, and how big is Hoover to the Hogs?
Well, I think it will depend on how they do this weekend. If they go down and win 2 of 3 at Texas A&M, you don't really go on the road expecting to sweep. But if they go down and win 2 of 3, I think they're in great position in terms of a national seed, and maybe you don't go nuts down there trying to win it. But I think you would want to get at least a couple wins if you could. Get your pitching set up for the following weekend. The interesting thing is the pitching has been great this year. Number 2 and 3 starters last week, and the week before, they've combined to go in 4 games, just 10 innings combined. And so we have a press conference with Coach Van Horn at noon. We're anxious to hear whether there's going to be some, different people starting in the 2nd and 3rd spot. Gage Wood from Batesville has done a great job in coming in relief. Will McIntyre, has pitched well had a little slump there, but it's going to be interesting to see how he plays that out this weekend. And I'm sure that's going to be a heck of a place to play this weekend. They beat Mississippi State 2-3, and that was mostly because of their offense, not because of their pitching this last weekend.
Well, you look at the baseball, the log jam. You mentioned softball. Vanderbilt they don't have a team, but everybody in the league going. Look at 8-9 SEC teams at least getting into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and most of them hosted. Probably 5 or 6, depending on a couple there at the end. But you mentioned the poll. It's littered with SEC teams, and it's a consensus thing. I think there's 5 polls that I follow in college baseball, and all of them are consensus in 4 of the top 5, 4 of the top 6, whatever, it would be in SEC teams. The people who do this for a living, who watch everybody else, not just the team you're covering, respect the SEC a great deal in terms of baseball. And I'm looking forward to watching this weekend, and then the SEC tournament next week, and really the week after that when things get to survive and advance.
Well, baseball really well. I used to work with a guy that played.
How about these guys? 3 wins in a row. We call that a winning streak. Hadn't happened before this year. Might not happen after, but it's been a good 3 days.
Well, I love that background, Busch Stadium, the St. Louis Arch back over your shoulder. It's right across the street from the International Bowling Hall of Fame. I wonder if they have a special exhibit in there for Roy Munson or Ernie McCracken, the Big E. Earl Anthony Weber. So I got to ask you this. I worked with a guy that played baseball for BYU for several years, and then he finished up at the University of Memphis, but he said it's a totally different kind of game out there. So that being said, Texas and OU. Texas, 37 College World Series. Oklahoma, a bunch of them. A couple of years ago, we remember the National Championship Series in Omaha with Ole Miss. Ole Miss won over Oklahoma. What's different about how they play baseball versus how we do it in the SEC, if there's any differences at all?
Yeah, I don't think there's much difference in those two teams. They're both well-rounded. They've both been quality programs over the year. Obviously, Texas, was a brand a long time ago. Oklahoma has had great success here lately. Have had a lot of really good players. The coaching has been, successful as well. It is you have to have both components there. You got to have the Jimmies and Joes, and you got to have the X's and O's. And I think both of those programs have shown over the course of time that while football certainly would be king at both places, they have put enough resources into baseball to give them a point to where it is a joy to have them coming into the conference, and a chore for everybody else to play them.
Yeah, it is. And again, Steve Johnson, I don't know if he's an Oklahoma native or whatever, but talk about the Sooners just won the Big 12 regular season, and their athletic department is a lot like Arkansas's. They're good in everything, and Arkansas struggled this past year in football and basketball, but top to bottom, they really, and Texas does too. Again, the gravity of them, they're marrying into the family. It is really going to be a lot of fun, Dudley. I have a question for you. How many players left Arkansas? Now, we had the first portal in December that ends in early January. Those numbers aside, how many left during the mid-April to May 1st window at Arkansas?
I believe it was 5. It was 5 total, and a couple of those were clearly because they didn't get the run during spring practice that they thought they would, and they saw that the portal people coming in at their position and didn't get to play last year, so they headed on out. It wasn't anybody that was stunning. If these days, if somebody had started 40 games and then transfers, it'd be a different thing. But you get a lot of portal traffic because they're not getting play. And as we mentioned on the show many times, it's professional sports now. There's a waiver wire. Yeah. You may not come out and say it, but there's a lot of kids that are told or hinted at that you're not going to play here. You might want to go play somewhere else, so I can bring somebody else in here. And they have still have a few scholarships left that they can give. They feel good about what they've gotten in the portal, but it's a show me thing. You until we see that these guys come in and make a difference, you have a kind of a cynicism about whether it's going to work out or not, especially because, as I've always said, you're leaving one place for another for a reason. What was that reason? Why do you think it's going to fit here? It's it's a lot of different optics and dynamics that go into that.
Yeah, the two biggest transfer portal just epic numbers that are the standard are the Junction Boys. How many guys hit the portal on the Junction Boys? And Pat Dye's first spring at Auburn, I know 37 left. So that's still the number that you got to look at, but we just didn't have social media, chronicling every second of it. Let's bring in Vince Ferrara, the sports animal, 99.1 WNML up in Knoxville, into this conversation. And we'll be on a tight, we got about 18, 19 minutes left. Vince, talking about baseball in Arkansas, talk about those base Vols up in Knoxville, and the stretch run. You're one game in your division behind Kentucky, but I think the Vols are looking way at bigger things, or are they?
Well, I think the fans are. I think Christian Moore talked after last night's run roll win over Belmont, 10-0, and he was asked about goals, and he said, "Look, it'll be cool. Some of these individual records." He tied the single season home run record at the University of Tennessee with 24. Sonny Cortez hit 24 back in 1998. Incredible. He's already the all-time home run leader in career home runs. He's accomplished so many things individually. So he was like, yeah, these are cool. The SEC tournament, that'd be cool. But, it's about beyond that and the NCAA tournament. So they've had some disappointments. And so, he's experienced that, and they're motivated by that, but their mentality is still one game at a time and how they approach it. So, we'll see if Tennessee gets any help from Vanderbilt against Kentucky, and then obviously got to keep tabs on Arkansas and A&M on the other side. But A&M's got their hands full, and they got a tough road to be in that position. So we'll see with Tennessee hosting South Carolina this weekend.
Earlier in the show, we had Jake Wimberly, ESPN 105.9, The Afternoon Drive, Jackson, Mississippi. He does the matrix and the numbers on college football and the SEC. Great stuff, and I'm going to get it to all of y'all next week. We'll have him back on the show with us. And talked about Tennessee as one of his top 4 teams in football. Nico Iamaleava. I've been working on it.
Outstanding. Nice.
Vince, I got the approval, but let's talk about it, man. Graduation is Friday or Saturday because Mark Ham, cousin Mark, Audrey's cousin, cannot be there because Will's graduating from up on the hill. But damn, man, 100 days away from the start of college football season, if I am not mistaken. I think that's 100 days. That's 2,400 hours. If anybody's keeping track.
And I love the fact that ESPN and /ABC or actually Disney revealed those week 0, which I hate saying.
Yeah, I do too.
I just haven't thought of anything better to replace it. But week half is better than week 0. But in week 1, all those TV games, the SEC on ABC, which again sounds really weird. And look, it's not going to be any different. It's not going to have the big game appeal that CBS did. And I know Gary Danielson would frustrate a lot of fans. I mean, Tennessee fans, everybody thinks that Gary Danielson hates their school except for Georgia and Alabama. And even Alabama thinks that Alabama fans think he hates them when they play Georgia or whatever. But it had a big game feel, like the marquee game of college football. Those ABC broadcasts for the SEC, it's going to be the same as an ESPN broadcast. I don't care if they change the music, if they have some different graphics. It's the same thing. It's the same announcers.
Yeah.
It's going to feel the exact same way because it's the same production, whether it's ABC, ESPN, the SEC Network Plus, whatever. It's all the same production. So I think it takes away from that. But man, there's some really good early season matchups, and so that kind of really hit home and how different this league and a lot of leagues around college football are going to be when you start seeing, all right, this is the first Big Ten game for USC. It's the first SEC or first game as an SEC member for Oklahoma or Texas, and you go on with how different. Certainly can't wait for it. It'll be a lot of fun.
Hey, I got to tell you, I am so in with Vince on this. I mean, the week 0 thing, I don't get it. You don't call your first wife your zero wife, or maybe some people do.
I don't. I promise.
Well, I don't know. It depends on how it went. Maybe
just if you're keeping score, that counts. So that's got to be week 1.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I'm turning 61 on August 30th. And I was thrilled that Arkansas moved their game with UAPB to Thursday night, because now I can cover that game on Thursday night, Friday celebrate the birthday, Saturday celebrate the birthday, Sunday celebrate the
2 weeks
by watching football all weekend.
Yeah. And, it was cool when Greg McElroy spoke Monday night at the Touchdown Club in Memphis talking about Tennessee going to Oklahoma, man, for the first game for the Sooners in Norman, Boomer Sooner, and that Conestoga wagon's going out there. I mean, he's like, you're just Joe Sixpack out there in the middle of America, and you're looking at, hey, what's on TV tonight? By the way, I saw something at the mother-in-law's this past weekend for her birthday party, Origin Sports Network. Have y'all seen this? It's called Origin, and it plays all these old games. I was watching the 2006 matchup on ABC, by the way, Georgia Tech and Calvin Johnson against Virginia Tech and Eddie Royal. The announcers were Bob Greasy and Brad Nessler. And just thinking about that was a magical pair right there. So y'all take over. I mean, I'm just for TV. And you're right. The first time Oregon playing at Michigan or something like that. How cool is that going to be?
In week 1, I'm excited about
week 1. Absolutely.
I look forward to watching a lot of good football, and certainly it's not the most litany of games that will decide the fate of college football. But there are going to be a lot of teams that that we didn't think would have a loss week 1. And are going to have to come back from that. And I know certainly they're glad that there will be 12 instead of 4. So have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I'm so fired up. I mean, next a week from Friday, we'll be up in Rockbridge, Missouri, trout fishing on the Spring River, canoeing and fishing Saturday and Sunday. And there'll be a little bit of embellishing with fan bases talking about their teams. There'll be a lot of Razorbacks up there. Vince, I've
always wondered, Rob, this other job that you supposedly have, when do you do that?
I do it all the time, but I'm actually going to be off that Friday. And so I will be, but
I know you're plenty busy. I just didn't know if you ever went to the office or whatever.
No, I'm remote.
You tend to be on here or hunting, fishing.
Couple of days a week, but I'm mainly remote. I've got 3 laptops over here when I'm at the farm in here. It looks like I look like a trader. I've got 3 laptops going simultaneously at the same time. If that doesn't. Yeah, boy, what are we doing there? You're making me nervous. I sound like Foghorn Leghorn. But Vince, he just alluded to that it is week 1. I don't buy the week 0 either. That's a gimmick or whatever. But you look at Tennessee and Ole Miss, and Ole Miss had their best season ever last year. Tennessee won 8 games last year. Now you got Iamaleava coming in there. You talked about Mr. Pierce, who likely could be the number 1 pick in the draft. Let's go back, circle the wagons. You got an edge rusher that good. He may win you 3 or 4 games by taking away half the field.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he did start to draw more attention last year. Now he's going to get game planned even more. So he's got to get better. he can't just talent his way into sacks. He's pretty good at getting the quarterback to the ground once he gets there. And a big part of it is I think Tennessee's strength is their defensive line with bodies, big bodies, but do they have another guy that can be twitchy and get to the quarterback that can make teams pay when they are committing too much to James Pierce Jr.? Because then they're going to think twice about doing it, and then that's when James Pierce Jr. can go to work. And they'll move him around as well. You sort of let hybrid stand up outside linebacker, defensive end. But when you have multiple guys that can get after the quarterback and you can push the pocket from the inside, and Tennessee has guys that can do that, whether it's Omar Norman-Lott or Amari Thomas, two guys that aren't high NFL draft picks, but I think could have their name called. Bryson Eason is another one with tackle and end versatility. So that is a very experienced, deep group. They have 14 returning defensive linemen, and they could easily go 12 deep in what Rodney Garner can play and rotate. And then you keep guys fresh. You're making plays in the fourth quarter. I bet there's quite a few teams in the SEC that can't go 3 deep in terms of players that they trust, not just what the recruiting rankings say. Well, this is a guy who's a 5-star, so we can play him. Well, what happens when you play him? Some guys are going to pan out, some are not. Tennessee feels good about all of these guys, and there's more coming in the summer. So it's pretty good when you got an edge pass rusher, you got a really good defensive line, and you feel good about your quarterback, and you got a play caller that always has really good offenses. There's other areas of question on this team.
Yeah.
But those aren't bad places to start in looking at Tennessee.
Rodney Garner, Bo Davis, Dudley, 2 best defensive line coaches, I believe, in America. You go 14 deep and more on the way, that's scary. Dudley, along
Here
those
at Arkansas,
lines.
there's going to be 9 different names in that defensive line from what they had that went out the door and coming in here. So that's not necessarily a strength, but obviously they went after guys to try to build that up, because that was the one area they didn't think that they were able to improve last year. And we know that the 2 defensive coordinators came in here and did a good job. But they knew an area they needed to go get, and that's what they worked on in recruiting.
Well, and that you read my mind. I was going to ask you that. It makes the secondary better when you got a better pass rush. Guys got, Jalen Milroe had a minute and a half to stand in the pocket on Gravedigger. I mean, Auburn played patty cake, can't rush 2. What about the Hogs in year 2 on the defensive side? You said they went and got 9 new defensive. You're talking about end-to-end tackles and everything in between? A couple of names jump out at it?
As I've said oftentimes, Otis knows more about that than I do. But I do think that here's why I think they're going to be better on the defensive line is because of the guys who got playing time last year.
Yeah.
And had Nico Dallier, Cameron Ball, are 2 guys that come to mind that I think are going to have great years. They flashed during spring practice. They got the baptism by fire last year, and some of it didn't go great, but that's how you get experience. That's how you get better. That's how you develop. And I think that Deke Adams does a really good job with them in terms of getting out of them what he can. So I think they're going to be improved there. But again, I've gotten to this point now, being 60 and all, that when they do really good in spring drills or they do really good in practice, I want to say, hey, that's cool. They might be pretty good. And then I go, well, wait, it's practice. And the other teams, as we mentioned, have, All-Americans and all that. So it's, I'm far more reserved in making predictions than I used to be in terms of, especially with, when you got 30 new guys in here or whatever it is each year. BYU had 39 new names last year when they played Arkansas the previous year. So it's just, there's the potential to be better. Is there potential to be great? No.
Yeah. It is crazy. I mean, Dudley Dawson, Hogville.net, Vince Ferrara, the sports animal in Knoxville. Got a few minutes left before we wrap it up. Real quick, Vince, and then to Dudley. Vince, name me a player on the Tennessee roster that nobody's heard of. Last year you talked about Pierce. We've heard of him, but anybody else that is making progress you're hearing about? And now summer workouts hadn't really started yet, but give us a name. Maybe basically what I'm saying is a deep discount value stock that we can buy.
Well, that nobody's heard of is kind of tough to quantify because certainly
they've all heard of.
You're right. When you get outside of the market, especially, there could be less that are a factor. I'd give you somebody that's really important, and that's Tennessee's addition on the offensive line in Lance Hurd from LSU. I think he is ultra important for their success because he's a one-time 5-star, was a freshman there. Maybe a lot of people didn't know about him because he just played last year at LSU, but he immediately performed well and took over that left tackle spot. They moved John Campbell from left tackle to right tackle. Now you feel good about those two tackle positions. Now they're not deep, but I think Hurd is a big part of that. Still got to figure out left guard. But in terms of one guy that's outside of maybe the stars that is being talked about, I think it's Hurd. And here's a couple quick numbers for you, Rob. You like numbers, so here's a couple for you, some stats. Tennessee has 15 seniors. 11 of them are on the defensive and offensive lines. That's where you want to have your experience, that in quarterback. And then Tennessee had the fewest players hit the portal in the last academic year, 15. And Tennessee had the second fewest ads in the portal. Tennessee just had 8 players added in the portal. LSU had the fewest with 7. And Brian Kelly was talking about, hey, we don't buy players, but that's because you missed on some defensive linemen. We know what that's all about. But what the average is? The TV show that I'm on Sundays with John Pennington, the sports source, that's fantastic. He runs numbers all the time, so you'd appreciate it, Rob.
Yeah.
The average SEC portal exits this year was 25. That's the average of how many players each SEC team lost. Tennessee only had 15 departures between after the season and the spring. Plus, Tennessee was one of only 2 schools where they didn't lose a head coach, have a change at head coach or coordinator. South Carolina was the only other one. So you have coaching stability. You don't have the level of turnstile that some others do. It just makes it a little bit easier to have that camaraderie out of the gate. And like Dudley talking about Arkansas and Ole Miss and a lot of these teams that have all these new pieces, sometimes it takes a while to get going.
Yeah, and reverse everything he just said about that's Arkansas.
Yeah,
had some turnover in the roster, turnover in the coaches, turnover in the mindset of everything. To answer your question, Jaquindon Jackson is a running back that came in here from Utah. I don't know if there's a college fantasy football thing, but if you did, that's the guy you should get from Arkansas because he's going to get the ball down at the goal line for sure. They've got a bevy of really good backs, but he's the guy who, when you need 3, gets you 5.
Yeah,
Coach Petrino and Coach Pittman have raved about him. But he's a guy, because of all the other running backs that have been here and have gotten listed before, that I don't think a lot of people know just how good he is, and he's good.
Yeah. Well, when you say that carries a lot of weight, as does what Vince said. Hey, look, guys, awesome show. Thank you, as well as Jake Wimberly. We'll do it again next Wednesday. This is the off season. That's why we're getting ahead of everybody else while everybody else is taking off. We're practicing. We're going to summer school. That's what we call this. This is summer school. Hey, we live in the greatest country in the history of the world, people. Don't ever forget it. When you have the best guest on your show like we do and the best producer, you got to be thankful every day. Go out and help other people. We'll see you next week. Until tomorrow, we're out of here. Tell your friends about us. Have a great day.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal. And the people